Hello and welcome back to another episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so excited you're joining me today. I'm Bess Hawthorne. Today I have a very special guest, Angela Smith. She's a veteran homeschooler and grandmother of 11, and hospitality is a vital part of her faith and family culture. She's the founder and creator of InquisiCook, a homeschool program that teaches science-driven cooking, and she also happens to be one of the sponsors of this podcast. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Bess. I'm so delighted to be with you today.
Well, I'm so glad you could join me. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about how you started InquisiCook.
Okay. Well, I am married to a wonderful man. We will celebrate our 34th anniversary next week. We live in Northeast Georgia, just outside of Athens, Georgia. We have 4 kids and 11 grandkids. For most of my adult life, I've been a homemaker and a homeschooling mom and now a homeschooling grandmother. We enjoy gardening together. We live a very simple life and we kind of like it that way. We live in the woods, so I also enjoy nature study and hiking. I'm like a 6-year-old kid when I go out in the woods. You know how children will bring back pockets full of rocks and interesting looking sticks and things like that. I do the same thing, only I
Do you have frogs in your pockets?
Not usually frogs. I will usually take pictures of frogs and very excitedly send them to, whoever likes to see pictures of things like that. But I will bring home rocks and interesting pieces of wood and turn them into home decor. In fact, in my living room, there is a wooden tray that has dead butterflies and bugs next to a magnifying glass.
This is probably delightful to the 11 grandchildren who come over to visit.
They are. They love it. Kids love looking at that kind of thing, and my husband is a very good sport.
He puts up with the dead bugs and butterflies as decor.
He does, and he knows that sometimes I bring back food from the forest, so he enjoys that aspect of it, mushrooms and muscadines and blackberries and things like that.
So did your interest in food and nature and that sort of thing help you to create InquisiCook? Because I know that the concept is food science combined with culinary arts. So is that where your mind is located? Just you really love the science behind the cooking, the science in nature. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I have a very curious mind and I'm not afraid to explore, so that helps. And I'm also kind of a research fanatic. So whatever I'm interested in, I tend to dig and keep digging until I get to the end of a road or decide to take an alternate pathway and look into something else. But the idea for InquisiCook actually came about as a need in our family. Of course, we were homeschooling. We've been homeschooling for many, many years. And when my youngest daughter was, I think, 9 or 10, she wanted to make cooking one of her homeschool classes. Of course, we were already cooking together in the kitchen. We had people over for Sunday lunch quite frequently and got together for other things, but she wanted it to be one of her classes. And I thought, well, okay, we will do that, but we're going to incorporate science into that. I was never quite clear on why so many of the science programs for youngsters focused on things that were very distant from their real lives. Zebras, volcanoes, things like that. So I don't have anything against zebras and volcanoes, but I thought it made more sense to start with their immediate existence. So that was kind of where that came from. About that time, I had read a book by Dr. J. Adams called Christian Living in the Home. And in one of the chapters in that book, he was encouraging people that were interested in cooking to look into the science of it. He was particularly speaking to mothers and homemakers. It's like, you might enjoy this process more and it might be more of a creative outlet if you understood what was going on beside the mechanics of making the food. So that kind of clicked with that. So everybody's on board. That's what we're going to do. And I set about to try to find the perfect resources to make this happen in our homeschool. And I bought a lot of things, many, many things, both things that were targeting the homeschool market, things that were for children just in the general market. I bought things that were geared towards adults. And I thought, well, we'll just piece together something. And boy, what an ugly quilt that was. It was just like the worst of all worlds. It just was not what I needed. And it was very onerous to try to put together. I'll say it that way. So I decided, if I can't find that, I will create that. I always tell my husband, like, the 5 most dangerous words in my vocabulary are, how hard can it be? And I did eventually learn, but
It's pretty hard.
it's been a great experience. And it actually is a very good fit for the homeschool community to explore science through cooking and to enhance your cooking with science. But I
Mhm.
think even beyond that, it just makes sense. We
Well,
don't
kids
know what the
love
future
hands on
holds.
projects. Absolutely. Kids love hands on projects. And like you said, we eat 3 times a day plus snacks. And so it's something that
Yes,
they will use for their entire lives. They need the tools to be able to feed themselves. They need to know how to work pots and pans in the kitchen and be able
right.
to do that. And if you understand the science behind it, it will help you not only be able to cook very basic things, but to understand how to take that and create something further. Like, for instance, if you know how to cook eggs all the different ways, well, then all of a sudden you can take that knowledge and create something a little more complex and it makes sense to you.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what we're shooting for.
Well, that's wonderful. You probably didn't realize you were doing research at the time when you collected all those different materials. You didn't realize you were doing in depth research just to realize, okay, there's nothing really that fits what I want. So here we go.
Yeah, I had no idea, actually. I thought I really was going to be able to piece it together. But it turned out, to put me on the road to figuring things out. It was a very long road, but it has been a joy and very interesting and inspiring.
How long have you been working at it? I know you have Inquisicook 1, the first
Mhm.
course, and now you're working on the second course.
Yes,
Is
that's
that how you
currently
say it? Is it courses or is that how you would
right.
describe it?
Yeah, each one would be considered a course.
Okay.
And so Inquisicook 2 is in the process of rolling out. There were a lot of years between that first idea and when we went into production. So, we graduated our kids from homeschool, the grandkids started coming along. We had a relocation, and then my husband finally said, you're not getting any younger. I have always wanted you to go ahead and go for this. So you need to decide if you're going to. And if you are, let's focus heavily on that. So I said, yes, let's do it. And that was in January of 2020.
So does
So
he do it with you?
he is not in the content creation aspect of it. He is a huge support on the back operations, technology. He helps with the financial stuff. Of course, he's a great counselor in terms of decision making. So he helps keep the big picture on track. And when we travel, he is my favorite pack mule. He is a never ending source of support and help in those aspects. But for the content stuff, he's mostly just a recipe tester.
I'm sure he enjoys that job very much.
He does.
So, part of your program is providing recipes, instruction sheets, and forms for every lesson, along with easy to follow directions. So, does this mean that the parents present the course to their children and the children do it as a self taught course at their own pace? Does it require the parent to do teaching as well? Or is it just completely something a child can do independently?
So most of our students do work independently. We've tried to make it as streamlined on both the parent side and the student side. We do all of the teaching, so the parents don't have to read a teaching script or explain how to do things. We're explaining how to do all of the things. So students, if as long as they've got the maturity to follow instructions and they can be trusted with knives and hot things and so forth, they can work independently. The parents do provide the oversight in terms of making sure things are safe. They also do the grading. We provide the answer keys, for instance, for the unit exams. They would be the ones that do the grading and record keeping. We give them tips and guidelines on the marks of doneness and quality for recipes that students prepare so they know what they're looking for. And they help assess student quality using those guidelines. So really the parents are fairly hands off aside from that, and also, of course, providing the groceries and making sure the students have what they need.
And being recipe testers as well.
Exactly. Yes, we like for this families to do that as a family. We call it sensory evaluation. That way, the student gets to hear feedback, both good and bad. We always, at the top of the form, it says, be kind, be specific, be honest. So we think it's good for students to hear honest feedback and then incorporate that into future attempts at the recipe. Because as we always say, we want them to be intuitive cooks and not recipe followers. And we want them to be able to branch out and make variations on the recipes that are more suited to their family's tastes.
Well, it's very rewarding to feed people and to have a success, but we learn through our mistakes. And so when you have honest feedback, it just encourages you to try again, make it better, and improve. So I think that approach is a really great way to teach kids to cook, which again is a very valuable tool. And so many kids grow up not knowing anything. They
That
just,
is
oh, go ahead.
absolutely true. We learned during COVID that there was a big chink in our armor when it came to food culture. So when you went to the grocery store and things started to sell out, what was gone? It was the frozen pizzas, the Chef Boyardee, the hamburger helper, meals in a can. And I'm not trying to speak against those things particularly, but there was panic across the nation because parents didn't know how to feed their children from raw ingredients. And now the school systems weren't feeding them 2 meals a day, and they didn't know how they were going to get by without Kraft macaroni and cheese. And so what was left on the shelves were the dry beans, the raw onions, raw poultry, things like that. They did not know how to manipulate those into meals. And so I think that's something that needs to be addressed on a broader scale than just the homeschool community.
Absolutely. Well, jumping into hospitality, feeding people is a great beginning to hospitality. And hospitality takes many forms. It doesn't always include feeding people, but it often does. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on hospitality and ways that you do it in your home.
We are big on hospitality. We think it's so important to building community, both just in your town, but also in your church, within your family. We do big events, not very often.
Hmm.
So we'll focus a lot of our energies will be on once or twice a year doing like a big 4th of July picnic and having lots of people. Or there's a thing that we do from time to time. We call it Oyster Fest, where when the oysters are good, we bring in bushels and bushels of oysters and, have a oyster shucking and live music and things like that. So we enjoy entertaining on that scale. We also just like having people over for lunch after church on Sunday. The kids come over most weekends. So we do it both big and small.
Do most of your children live nearby?
No, there's only one that's really nearby. The one that I was talking about wanting to learn how to cook. They live about 6 minutes away. 2 of them are also here in Georgia, a good bit further away. And then one is in San Antonio. So we don't get to see them as often as we would like, but
At least they're driving distance and it's not a plane flight.
that's
So many
true.
of mine are. Ever
Oh,
since we
no.
moved up north, it's been so difficult because to see the ones in the south, we really do have to fly unless we want to drive for days and days. So
Right.
that's pretty tough. You're spending a lot of time on the road. It would be much better to just do a plane ticket and, find a good price on a plane ticket and then save all that time for visiting instead of 3 days on the road there and 3 days on the road back. It's just
Oh,
not
yes.
worth
And
it.
then you're exhausted when you get there,
Yeah.
trying to be chipper and engaging. And
Yes. So you mentioned oysters. That sounds very intriguing. We do not have fresh oysters up here. Apart from oysters, what is one of your favorite menus that you might serve when you're having company over?
well, oysters are a sometimes treat, even for us, even though we're fairly close to the ocean. So, but one of my favorite menus to make is pho, PHO, the Vietnamese chicken soup. And there are a few reasons why I think this is a good fit for when we have guests over. You can make it gluten-free very easily without having to substitute any kind of like ingredients like chickpea pasta or whatever. You can just make it the way it is and it's gluten-free. It's dairy-free. It can easily be dished up low carb. It's not that high in fat. So we can kind of address all of the dietary needs and restrictions. It's also, you can customize the spice level by choosing what you put in it. If you want to add jalapenos or sriracha on top, it's not inherently spicy where some
Mm-hmm.
people aren't going to enjoy it. It's not so strange that young children would say, no, I don't want that, because they can just eat it as a chicken noodle soup.
Mm.
We make it with rice noodles, and kids just think, hey, this is very flavorful chicken noodle soup. You don't have to add cilantro and squeezes of lime, things like that. And it becomes very approachable for kids. And then every guest can just add what they want. We just put out like a buffet of possible inclusions, and everybody fills their bowls. We put out big bowls so they can really stuff them. I mean, it is a soup only in the sense that the ingredients are in broth. But by the time it gets assembled, it's a very hearty meal. And it's also nice because it has so many little things that have to be chopped. The limes have to be sliced. The cilantro has to be chopped. Green onions have to be sliced. That if you've got guests that are wanting to jump in and do something, you can just hand out ingredients and cutting boards, and you can fellowship while all of these little bits and pieces are being prepared. So we think it's a very flavorful dish too.
That sounds delicious. I don't think I've ever made this. It does sound similar to a build your own bowl, except like you say, in soup form. So everyone can create something individual that they prefer. And it works great with allergies, like you mentioned. So this is a wonderful recipe to have in someone's back pocket. I'm going to have to print it out and
Yeah,
make
it's
sure I have
definitely
it.
it's along the lines of build your own bowl, because you can put out the rice noodles, but you can also put out rice. You can put out brown rice. You can put out cauli rice. You can put out whatever kind of vegetables you think would go in this. And people could just really make it their own.
Is it really a one dish wonder, or do you serve sides with it? I mean, obviously, if you have a whole bar of things, that may include your side, but would you serve anything extra?
I don't. I don't know how authentic households do it, but we feel like, you've got a lot of options here. You can make it your own. And it would just like putting out bread or salad with it, to me, would be extraneous.
It doesn't fit. Well,
Yeah.
especially since you have noodles and you also have vegetables and you kind of have all the pieces in place.
Yes. Yes.
Do you serve a dessert with it or at the end after
You know,
people have eaten their bowl?
I will admit, I really like making desserts, but I enjoy that as a leisure activity where I can just kind of putter along and be creative and wait for the outcome. And by the time I've got a whole meal ready to go, I usually am not able to enjoy making desserts. So I have a couple of very quick go-tos that I make. One is a blender coconut pie, where you just put evaporated milk, eggs, vanilla, coconut, and some nutmeg, grated nutmeg in a blender. And you pour it in a pie plate, and it basically creates this kind of custard type pie without a crust. You can have it in the oven in 5 minutes. And your oven will hold probably at least 4 of these pies. So if you need to scale, it's not that big a deal. So that's one of my quick and easy ones that I do. I also like to do coconut meringue macaroons, because they come together very quickly. And again, they're gluten-free, they're dairy-free, so they don't have a lot of allergens that people have to tiptoe around. But yeah, as far as the making of glorious desserts, it usually doesn't happen with meals that I've prepared.
That's okay. Sometimes when you have a rich, full main dish, you don't want something real heavy for dessert.
Right.
Do you use any shortcuts or time savers with this meal?
The main one is just to do the chicken base ahead. I love every type of chicken soup, so I make it a lot. And it's okay with me if it's just chicken and broth. I think it's like one of the soul warming meals of this life. So I make chicken base a lot. This one has a little bit of a different flavor profile, but you can absolutely like prepare your chicken and get it deboned and back in that stock for an overnight rest. and you're ready to go the next day. And it actually tastes better if you do
Mm-hmm.
that. You do
I
have to
could
have
see
the
that.
fridge space. So, and that's the other thing. The only thing that limits the scale of this recipe is the size of the pots you have on hand. It's not a big deal to double, triple, quadruple it.
And then you could also chop your vegetables ahead of time and really almost be ready when the guests walk in. I'm sure you heat the chicken in the broth first. Do you heat anything else, or is that really kind of the core of the dish?
Yeah, nothing else is pre-cooked. Even the noodles, they just have to soak in very hot water. You don't have to boil them. So you can do that 10, 15 minutes before you're ready to serve and they're good to go. Nothing else has to be cooked. I do chop the bok choy and put that in with the soup base on the day that I serve it, but that's really the only other part that has to be cooked in that sense of the word.
It sounds like the hardest part of this meal is just collecting the ingredients. I
Yes,
like
it is.
this.
It's like a lot of Asian cooking. It's a lot of components and a lot of chopping and that type of thing, but none of it's hard.
Mhm.
So sometimes you can see that long list of ingredients and say, "Oh, no, never mind, I'm not going to do it." But when you break it down, it's like, "Okay, how long does it really take to slice a lime?"
Right. Any other tips for the kitchen?
Well, speaking of chicken soup, I encourage people to make peace with chicken having skin and bones
That's
because there's a lot
a
of
pretty hard task for some people.
yes, yeah, there's a lot of value in the skin and bones. So when I make chicken soup base, I decide what I'm going to do with the skin, and it's never just thrown away raw. So I either keep it on the chicken while the chicken is cooking on the stove, and then remove it afterwards after all the good collagen has been extracted and given body to the stock and all the flavor. And then if you don't want the fat that's also coming out in that, you can just skim it off. If you chill it overnight, you can just take it off in chunks. So that's
Mhm.
no problem. If I don't want that in the stock, then I actually save the chicken skins and turn them into chicken chips.
Really? So
So
you
you just
fry them?
you can fry them. I just bake them. Put them on a sheet pan, spread them out, sprinkle them with salt, and bake them, and they become crispy and they're really yummy. You could also cut them into strips and like use them the way that you would use tortilla strips in tortilla soup, things like that. That it's just a little crunchy accompaniment that you're getting for nothing. Like
It
rather than
reminds me
throwing
of
it away.
right, it reminds me of fried chicken, when people are eating that crispy skin.
Yes. Yeah. For people that like that, it turns something that would otherwise be waste into a treat.
That's interesting. I have never done that before or even heard of it before. I have heard the value of keeping the skin on when you're cooking chicken in order to provide moisture and flavor and all of that. So I can definitely see the value in that. But a lot of times I will confess I do buy the boneless, skinless, whatever in the store.
Well, and I do
Probably
also
making it harder
sometimes.
than making it harder on myself.
Well, I see the value in the time saving. And also, it's nice to eat a piece of chicken where you're not having to kind of cut around a bone. So I am pro boneless, skinless in many ways. But I think there's a place for the bones and the skins in our lives
Mhm.
also.
Like you mentioned, some of it has the nutritional value as well. You're getting in a stock when people cook the bones in the broth for a very long time. It's taking out of the bones nutrients that you can benefit from.
Right, right. And speaking of the chicken skins, another thing that I don't see in a lot of kitchens that I could live without is a small portable fan. I call it my kitchen fan. So anytime I have something that needs to be dried before it goes in the oven, because moisture is the enemy of browning. And let's say you've done your chicken skins, but they're still moist and you want them to crisp up. If you just put a fan on them for a minute or two, they will dry out and crisp up beautifully. Same if you're roasting Brussels sprouts or something like that. And of course, you've had to wash them. And now you've got wet Brussels sprouts that are going to be prone to steaming in the oven instead of crisping up. So if you just lay them on a kitchen towel, turn a fan on them for a couple of minutes, they will dry so quickly. And I also use my fan to quickly thaw frozen meat. So if
That
there's a
is
little
a
tray of
great
pork chops,
idea.
you'll be amazed at how quickly you can thaw meat if you turn a kitchen fan on them. So I know it's kind of
Really?
a weird concept. There's no such thing as an actual kitchen fan, but that's what I call it. And I think it's so handy.
That is handy, and I have never done that before. I'll have to try it. This is a new tip for me.
I can't remember how I stumbled upon it, but once I did, there was no turning back.
You've held on to that one. Do you have any other advice for preparing for company coming over?
Well, I'm not really a master hostess, if that's the way to say it. I'm not that great at like breezing into the foyer and taking people's coats and purses and things like that. So I try to focus on the essentials when welcoming people, like make sure they know where the bathroom is, where the beverages are, and that they have something to nibble while I'm finishing up whatever I'm cooking. We always have nuts and cheese and pickles and things like that, and I just set out little dishes of those so they're not getting too hungry, especially if I'm running behind schedule. And it also just there's a fellowship aspect to nibbling on things while you're having a refreshing beverage and waiting for the food. I like to put on music. I think it just sets people at ease if it's not a big silent room. So there's a music company called Putumayo Music that does music from around the world. So almost any cuisine that you're serving, they will have music tracks that go along with that. And so I've got a lot of those, and they're fun to turn on. It kind of gets people in the spirit of whatever's going to be showing up on the table. For table decor, I like to use like natural elements. I'm not a big fan of buying things and storing them 362 days a year. So again, I just wander in the woods, and whatever I drag home, it's usually not dead bugs, but
You're not decorating your table with dead bugs and butterflies?
not yet. Never say never, but no, if I can get ivy, or I've got Vinca major that's growing in the yard, Nandina grows wild here, camellia, and you can just take those clippings and arrange them in whatever mason jars or vases, or just scatter them on the table. I also like to do zero waste centerpieces, where you can make a very beautiful centerpiece out of vegetables. So I can share some examples with you, some pictures online, but I like to decide what color story I want to tell, and then go to the farmer's market, go to the grocery store, and pick out vegetables that fit in with that color story, and then just come home and arrange them on a tray. And then I have fun coming up with recipes that utilize those ingredients over the next several days. Or sometimes I'll go to the lawn and garden department at the big box store and get bedding plants and use those in a centerpiece. And then after the event, I put them out in my garden or my flower bed.
That's a great idea. Real quick, back to the music. Is that something that we could find on something like Spotify or Apple Music?
I'm not sure if it's available on the streaming services. Probably. I just bought a bunch of them years and years ago. You can go, it's Putumayo.
Okay.
So they do have a website, and probably if you go to their website, you would be directed to any streaming services that offer them.
Well, that sounds fabulous. It sounds like a really fun background to have, especially if you pair it with the type of food you're cooking.
Yes. Yeah. So they've got like Parisian accordion music. They've got Colombian music, African music. It's just really cool stuff that you wouldn't stumble upon probably otherwise.
Well, and most of what you've mentioned so far is not something that people are going to do in their normal everyday weeknight at home sort of thing, whether it's the meal or the music. They would walk into your home and automatically be having fun and have something unique to share.
That's the goal.
Before we move forward, a big thank you to the sponsors for supporting today's episode. Are you searching for hands-on activities to help your kids explore the practical side of science? Look no further than your kitchen. Inquisicook blends food science and culinary arts into an engaging program that puts delicious food on the family table. Let Inquisicook do the teaching with lesson videos, reliable recipes, and assessment tools that put students on track for success. Their online platform is easy to navigate and optimized for mobile, so the learning experience can move from the classroom to the kitchen without a hitch. Inquisicook turns curious students into intuitive cooks, not just recipe followers. Say goodbye to the tyranny of the ingredients list and say hello to utilizing what's in season, what's on sale, or what's in the fridge. Visit inquisicook.com to view sample lessons, then check out the recipe gallery to see just how crave-worthy science can be. Today's culture shifts like sand, but New St. Andrews College is established on Christ, the immovable rock. The college is a premier institution that forges evangelical leaders who don't fear or hate the world. Guided by God's Word, equipped with the genius of classical liberal arts and God-honoring wisdom, with a faculty dedicated to academic rigor and to God's kingdom, New St. Andrews College offers an education that frees people. To find out more, visit nsa.edu. What's your best advice for making people feel welcome when they come into your home?
One of our big ones is if there are going to be kids joining us, to have activities available for them. So we do have a playroom at our house, and the kids will often go play in the playroom. But providing them with kind of a focused alternative can actually improve their fellowship with each other if they're all working on something in common. So I'm a big fan of wiki sticks. I think they're great creative play. They're cheap, they're reusable. So just setting out wiki sticks on the table where they're going to be eating so they can play with those, or butcher paper and crayons so they can make their own little tablescape. Or if you put out bowls of chopped vegetables or chopped fruit and give them paper plates and tell them to make pictures out of it, they can make their own fruit or vegetable mosaics while they're waiting for the food, and that becomes part of their meal. For outdoor, we usually have things that we've purchased, like for our big picnics and things like that. We've done the balloon helicopters where they blow up the balloon and it sends the helicopters flying. Glow sticks, big beach balls that we've blown up and are just sitting around in the yard. So we want the kids to be a part of our fellowship, but we don't want them to have to sit there with their hands folded. Especially if they've already been in church all morning, they're ready for some active play. So we try to give them outlets for that.
Those are fabulous ideas. I've never seen the balloon that lifts the helicopter. Where do you purchase that?
We get them at Amazon.
Okay.
If you just go to the Amazon party favors section, you'd be amazed at all the fun things that you can buy for next to nothing. And the kids
Yes,
just think they're the best thing ever.
I can imagine. I remember the army men with the parachutes. That
It's
I'm
very
not.
similar.
Yes, that's what it reminds me of, which every kid is always so delighted by.
Yes.
How high they can get them and who makes it to the earth fastest. Or also, when you say party favors, it reminds me too of the sticky men that you can put on the wall.
Oh,
And
yes.
they kind of flip downwards, and it's a race. I mean, you can make it a race to see which one kind of keeps flipping and makes it to the finish line first. And there's no cleanup, there's no mess. But it's so much fun.
It
There's
is
so
so
much
fun.
reward.
And there's no electronics involved.
No electronics. And when they're directed, like you said, if they have directed play, it prevents a lot of the fussing and arguing and fighting. If everyone has something to do and it's not maybe say just a general playroom with a small amount of toys that everyone's fighting over the same thing.
Right. Exactly. Yes. So there's a lot of that goes on when they're tired and at loose ends. Oh, well, she got
Mhm.
the calico critter I wanted, or I was playing with that truck first, or whatever. So if
Right. But
everybody has their own thing, you can short
right.
circuit that.
If everybody has their own little party favor, or if everybody has their own plate with their knife and vegetables that they can work on, or whatever. You mentioned fruit and vegetables. Did you say you give them a knife to work with, like a kid's safe knife, or how do you set that up?
I have done that. I have quite an arsenal of cutting mats and kid safe knives. It depends on how many kids and sometimes which kids. So if that definitely keeps them engaged longer and it's more purposeful. It has to be the right scenario or it turns into kind of a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But so usually I would say it's just like chopped, cucumber slices that are maybe quartered, or cherry tomato halves, shredded carrots. So if they want to make a face, it becomes the hair, that type of thing.
It's fun. Do you put a carrot on the table and let them peel it, or do you kind of prepare the things and let them just create? Or does it
Mu-
depend based on the age of the child?
It would probably be largely dependent on the age of the child. I tend to like to do it in advance. I'm a little bit of a control enthusiast. So if I have some things done in advance, at least I know that they'll have something to work with and I won't have to go show them how to hold a knife or
Sure.
show them how to not mash it, when they're slicing the cucumber, that type of thing.
Right. And you don't have to have band aids at the ready.
That's right.
If they can immediately just start making their little eyes and their nose and their mouth and their hair, then everybody's having fun.
That's right. That's right.
What is your must have kitchen item and where can we find it?
Well, your guests always give such good tips on the kitchen items, and I'm always nodding my head in agreement. Yes, yes, you can never have enough sheet pans, or, oh my, yes, you've got to have a bench scraper. So I tried to think of a couple of things that I don't see as often in other people's kitchens. One of them is a lemon trumpet.
Okay, I don't know what a lemon trumpet is. I have never seen that, I don't believe. She's showing me what looks like a funnel with some sort of
With teeth along the edges.
teeth. Yes,
So
looks like a
it's
big
a
giant screw.
it's a funnel shaped device that you screw into the top of a lemon, and as you do, these little blades along the skinny edge cut into the little pockets that hold the juice, and then you squeeze your lemon with this upright, and then you pour out however much lemon juice you need.
That is
So
so
it's
interesting.
the beauty of it is that if you only need a tablespoon of lemon juice, you can keep the trumpet inside the lemon, put it inside a mason jar, and put it in your refrigerator until the next time you need another tablespoon of lemon juice. So you can just squeeze what you need and then store the lemon otherwise. And you don't have to get out another reamer or lemon squeezer or whatever. So it doesn't take up much real estate, but I use it all the time.
And does it keep the seeds from coming out?
It does, because the little holes that are next to the blades are smaller than the seeds. Now, you'll have some escapees, of course, but it won't be like the mass seed evacuation that you see a lot of times. One of my other must-haves is a hands-free soap dispenser. So when I'm washing my hands in the kitchen, I usually need a high-powered soap. They're greasy, they're mucky, whatever. So I actually keep dishwashing liquid in my hand soap dispenser in the kitchen. And that's what I wash my hands with. I've always done that. So this means that if you're, let's say, handling raw chicken and you need to get soap on your hands, instead of having to use one hand that's covered in chicken juice to pump a pump and contaminating the pump, then you can just swipe your hand beneath it and kind of bump the faucet handle with your wrist, and you don't have any cross-contamination going on. And then also when I'm washing dishes, I just swipe my dishcloth underneath it. And I don't have to like turn a bottle over or do any pumping or anything like that.
That's a great idea. And having the dish soap in there makes it so easy for all of the things that you're talking about. The second part, washing your counters, hand washing dishes, and you don't have to have your Dawn or whatever brand you use. You don't have to have the bottle out on the counter, which can be unsightly.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, it's not necessarily designed for dish soap, but I've been using that one for probably 6 years, and I've never had a problem.
It never clogs or anything.
It never clogs.
It's funny that you show that because I was just looking on samsclub.com. I'm sure Costco and other places have it too, but I was just looking for a hand soap refill. I often use their shipping service. And I just saw one of those and looked at it and had the thought of, would I use that? So I may have to try it. It was in my mind of like, that would be really handy because you're not having to push down on it, like you say, when your hands are just gross. You can just set your hand under there and you're ready to go.
Yes, yeah. I've started giving them as wedding gifts. I think they're wonderful.
Where did you find yours? Did you order from Amazon or somewhere in the
That
store?
Yeah, that one came from Amazon, and that brand has gone up in price, but you can get them very inexpensively now for $25, something like that.
What brand do you have?
I have the Simple Human
Mhm.
brand. But like I said, there are others that are much cheaper that have equally high reviews.
Well, if yours has lasted for 6 years and is still going strong, then it may be worth paying if it's a little bit better quality. I don't know. I'd have to read reviews, but if it's a little bit higher quality, it might be worth it.
That's a fair point. And another thing I stumbled upon was what they call a noodle board. I had never heard of it, but I saw somebody advertising them online that was basically a wooden board that covered your stove or half of your stove so you could turn it into a solid surface that you could use for prep or staging ingredients. But it was very expensive. It was like $60 or $70. And I was concerned about the durability of how it would hold up, on a stove that has cast iron grates. So I got the idea to go to the home improvement store and go to the flooring department and look at floor tiles. So I purchased several 12-inch by 24-inch floor tiles, ceramic tiles, and one of them always lives on my stovetop now. So it covers the stove burners. It also is heat resistant, so you can put hot pots on it. You can put hot pans coming out of the oven on it. They look beautiful because they have so many different designs. You can get them that look like slate or marble or wood, whatever your kitchen decor is. And it gives you a handy staging area for your ingredients that you're going to be adding to whatever you're cooking. Most of the time when I cook these days, I'm not using all 4 burners. So that's kind of wasted space that gets all spattered upon. This is so easy to clean. If you've got grease spatters happening from one side of the stove and they're landing on this solid surface, it's a very easy matter to wipe it down, and you don't have to take off the stove grates and get all the nooks and crannies and things like that.
Okay, you're going to have
So
to send me a picture.
I happen to have one right here.
You happen to have one? Oh, yes.
So that's one. And look how pretty this one is.
That is beautiful and would be so easy to wipe. I mean, you just go to your automatic hand soap pump and you just do a little swipe, wipe that board, and you're done.
That's
A
right.
lot easier than pulling up grates and trying to get down in the underneath it.
Exactly. And they're less than $10.
And would last forever unless you happen to crack it.
That's right. Yeah. Ours have seen a lot of abuse and they're still going strong. So
Well, they're made for floors for people to be stomping across. So I'm sure they're very durable. That's a
right.
very good idea. And yes, like you said, it's not very expensive. I mean, that's just so interesting. I'll have to post a link to that as well. I'll have to
There you
find
go.
something on Home Depot that, matches the picture. For all of her recipes and her top recommended kitchen items, go to comeoverfordinner.com. I will definitely post these under recipes under her blog post as well as on the shop page so that you can see what it is she has been showing me. These are very fun and unique items, and none of them that she's mentioned have been on here before. So I'm excited to share them with you. Do you have a story for us?
I do have a story, and I've had a lot of kitchen fails over the years, so it was hard to pick one. But
I would imagine, especially as you're creating recipes and creating a homeschooling cooking curriculum, I'm sure that you probably have even more fails than you would want to admit. But out of that came a fabulous curriculum.
well, there were fails aplenty, but this was before I was working on Inquisicook. Had just joined a small church, I mean a tiny church that was still a church plant, and I wanted to put on a Valentine's banquet for the couples in the church. And it wasn't a very big event. There were like 24 people. So it wasn't huge. And we did it here at the house. And I was just really getting into my creative groove. I kind of sketched out what the plates were going to look like. We have a commercial quail farm about an hour away. And we went and got fresh quail. And we were going to have it grilled and sitting on this bed of sun-dried tomato grits and have a serving of spinach on the side. And I had never done a plated meal for more than a few people. So I thought, okay, this will be fun. And then for dessert, we were doing miniature pavlovas that were filled, I think it was with a chocolate custard and then whipped cream and chocolate shavings. So we went and we sourced all the ingredients. I had a friend that was helping me. She was very sweet and very industrious. And it was the day of cooking, and I had everything mapped out. I knew exactly what needed to happen when. And as I'm getting going, I'm thinking, okay, so those egg whites for the pavlovas need to be at room temperature. I'm going to go ahead and set the eggs out. So they'll be at room temperature and they'll whip up nicely. Now, in her right mind and thinking clearly, Angela would have said, eggs are really hard to separate when they're at room temperature. So this is where you would have heard that record scratch if live had a sound track that's like, wait a minute. But I didn't do that. I wasn't in my right mind. I set those eggs out and they did indeed come to room temperature. And when it was time to separate them, I thought I would never finish. They would not separate without breaking. I had so many broken yolks. I don't think I actually cried, but I wanted to because I had a very tight timeline that I was working on. So I did eventually get through all the eggs. Thankfully, I had enough because I had enough that needed to be scrapped from that project that I could have made the world's biggest omelet. So I finally got those done. But by that time, it took me an hour and a half to separate the eggs for this recipe. And I was way behind schedule. And so I'm kind of frazzled, but as you said recently in one of your shows, like, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. I'm trying
Never
not to panic. So we got back on track. My friend showed up to help and she's just going all in and we're getting the food ready to plate and she takes over the spinach. So it's just a very simple sauteed spinach meant to cut the richness of the grits and the quail, just garlic, olive oil, and spinach. So I had gone to Sam's and got these big quantities of everything. She is doing the spinach while I am plating the grits and the quail. And she said, this is not very much spinach. Well, of course, spinach is notorious for shrinking down. And I'm like, I'm sure it's enough. I calculated this pretty carefully. She's like, really, Angela, I don't think this is enough. And I went over there and I don't know, there was maybe 3 cups of spinach. Cooked spinach for all of these plates. And I was like, this is the only vegetable, other than the starter salad. Like there's no going to be veg on this plate. So we wound up putting these teeny tiny little portions on
a little dollop.
It looked like a dollop of pesto or something. People probably thought I was crazy, but we worked with what we had, and it was a great night.
Those of your guests who weren't real big vegetable eaters were probably thankful,
Probably thrilled.
Okay, we can manage this one swallow of spinach.
So
although I love spinach, so I would have loved more.
Too. Finished the rest of the evening. We played the newlywed game and had so many laughs, and it was just a real joyous time. I tried to forget the spinach debacle. And when we're cleaning up, I go to our second refrigerator, which is usually a beverage refrigerator. And I find 5 of those great big Sam's boxes of baby spinach. So the spinach mystery was solved a little too late. And we had quite a bit of spinach to eat that week. So she just didn't know that the rest of the spinach was in the second refrigerator. But, like you said, there were probably those.
Hurry and right. And you were focused on other things. So you didn't just have that idea that she hadn't looked there. You just kind of naturally assumed she'd gotten to all the spots and found everything.
Yes. So I was just going to say that was my lesson in it'll all work out anyway. People are just glad to be here.
Exactly. That reminds me of a new St. Andrews event that I helped with where we were bringing food from downstairs to upstairs and there were lots of helpers and some of the I'm guessing teenagers, I'm blaming it on them. It could have been us adults. I don't know. But somebody carried big pans of things and set them in a side room instead of in the main prep area. Possibly because they were bringing them when people were clearing the tables in the prep area or something like that, or they weren't sure where to set them. So they're going to put them in the side room, knowing that, of course, we know they're there. We'll come grab them, Anyway, at the end of the night, we found those pans, and it was after a bit of a panic. The main coordinator of the food, she kept saying, I thought I was going to have 3 pork tenderloins per table, per platter, and there were 2, and it ended up working out just fine. I mean, she had planned so much food that no one missed it, and, I'm sure, I don't know that there were many leftovers of the pork tenderloin, but or roast or whatever she had planned. I think it was pork tenderloin. Anyway, but she puzzled over it. And then when we were doing some cleanup, these massive pans were found of food. I think there were some green beans and some pork tenderloin. And oh, it was just like, why? Why?
Oh my goodness. Oh man.
It did make me learn the lesson that if something seems off, look around, double check all the places, search. maybe the calculations were off, or maybe you have big pots of something and pans of something, or packages of spinach hiding in a refrigerator.
That's excellent advice.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today and for joining me. I'm so glad you took time out of your busy schedule. We have enjoyed your recipes. I'm so excited to try this. It sounds like a perfect one to add to my arsenal for when people are coming over.
I've had so much fun. It's great to chat with you.
I have 2 extras for you today. The first one is a tip. The second one is a recommendation. I received a tip from Samantha on Instagram. She sent in a recommendation for handling raw chicken if it's not your favorite thing to do. She says that she freezes her chicken and then cuts it while it's frozen so it doesn't feel slimy. She might let it defrost just the slightest bit so it's not freezing her hands. But if you let it defrost too much, then the outside does get a little bit slimy or slippery. And so you want to cut it while it's completely frozen. She sometimes does this to cut it into cubes or strips, and it makes it a lot easier. So that's just a tip if some of you are new to cooking or maybe just really don't like touching raw chicken. I'm used to it now. When I first was married, it wasn't my favorite thing to do. But now I don't. It doesn't bother me at all. But I do like that tip. Oh, and use a really sharp knife to do it because that's probably going to make it a lot easier. Now for my recommendation. I have a sister in Fayetteville, Arkansas, who teaches literature classes in person, but is expanding this year to offering classes online for any homeschooler to be able to sign up for. The classes are for 7th through 12th grade, which made me wonder if it was ethical for me to identify as a high schooler. But then I saw that she is also offering a class for adults, and my dilemma was solved. The time for the meeting is during the day, and I do teach 2nd grade full time, and so then I was sad again. But she recently added the option of watching the recorded class later. So anyone can sign up. If the meeting in person class time doesn't work for you, you can still sign up, watch it recorded, kind of a work at your own pace type class, or watch the discussion. But she also is going to have a Discord group for discussion throughout the week so that you could interact with people, ask questions, maybe give your comments or thoughts on the book. And she has a list on the website that tells what is going to be read, and they all look fabulous. So now that you have all the details, you can avoid the emotional roller coaster I've been on and go and sign up. She loves literature more than anyone I know. She's been teaching for many, many years, and her joy and enthusiasm for literature and great books has yet to wane. So go check out the course offerings at timetravelersliterature.com. That's timetravelersliterature.com. Until next time, bye for now.